The Tasmanian tiger might still be alive, but not where you think. For nearly 90 years we have been searching the wrong island, the wrong forest, the wrong place. Every camera trap, every expedition, every blurry photo you have ever seen on the news. Because there's a place bigger than England where almost no scientists have ever set foot. Where local hunters describe an animal with stripes, a stiff tail, and a jaw that opens nearly 90 degrees. They even have a name for it. If they are right, then the most famous extinction story of our century is completely wrong. The Tasmanian tiger was not a tiger, and it was not a wolf. Its real name was the thylacine. The thylacine was a marsupial, the same family like kangaroos, Tasmanian devils, and koalas. The thylacine had a wolf-shaped body, stripes across its back, and a stiff, thick tail. And for its young, it had a pouch, like all other marsupials. And here is a fact that matters tremendously. The thylacine is said to have extraordinary camouflage. Researchers who studied it believe that even if you're standing a foot or two away from it, if it's the right lighting and in the right place, you cannot see it. It would be completely camouflaged. It was an animal that was built to disappear, built to move quietly through hard and harsh terrain. Now, the thylacine was never only Tasmanian. Fossil evidence confirms it ranged across mainland Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. Then, around 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, the thylacine vanished from mainland and from New Guinea. Tasmania was not its origin. Tasmania was the last escape. And if one place could act as a refuge, the question we need to ask is, could there have been another one? The biggest suspect in mainland and New Guinea disappearance are dingoes, a wild dog that people that came to live in Australia brought over with them approximately 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. It was not an overnight event. Dingoes competed for prey, added pressure to populations already struggling from human hunting and from climate change. It might have even eaten small pups from the thylacine, or even tried fighting with adult ones. Where dingoes spread, thylacines disappeared. Where dingoes never reached, thylacines survived. That's why they survived in Tasmania, because Tasmania is an island and it has a stretch of water where dingoes could never cross, and because of that, the thylacine kept going for thousands of extra years. And we definitely made a mistake by assuming that Tasmania was the only place that had a wall. In Tasmania, thylacine survived right up until European settlements. Farmers blamed them for killing sheep, even though it was mostly feral dogs. But the thylacine was easy to see, easy to claim, and easy to shoot. The government even started paying bounties for dead thylacines. By 1909, over 2,000 thylacines were killed just for the bounty. The last known wild thylacine was shot in 1930, and the last known captive one died in 1936.
Distinguished by his straight, unjointed tail, is also a dangerous opponent, though, like the devil, is now very rare, being forced out of its natural habitat by the march of civilization. This is the only one in captivity in the world.
Since 1936, thousands of sightings have been reported in Tasmania alone, not just tourists, but rangers, wildlife workers, and farmers who know the land. Western Tasmania is enormous, dense, and largely unvisited. A quiet, stealthy predator with extraordinary camouflage could move through that country for a very long time without even being seen. Could thylacines have survived past 1936? For sure, easily. A zoo animal dying does not mean the last animal on Earth died the same day. Could it be that it's still alive today? Well, 90 years of serious searching without hard evidence is a long silence, but the sightings have never really stopped. On mainland Australia, there was something that most people never heard about. It was long believed that thylacines disappeared from mainland Australia 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. That was the accepted science based on fossil records. Then recently, researchers found a rock art in Arnhem Land, allegedly one of the most remote and hard parts of all Australia. Well, that changed that number completely, because cave paintings of the thylacines drawn by people who clearly saw them with their own eyes dated to only a few hundred to 1,000 years ago, which means the thylacine was alive in mainland Australia long into the modern era. It was simply in a place almost nobody went. Arnhem Land sits in the top of Australia. It's enormous. It's so remote and difficult to occupy that until today, it's basically only controlled by Aboriginal Australians. The only ways dingoes came to Australia is by people bringing them there. But in these areas, people never brought them, and it's hard to go by their own. So it's very possible that dingoes had a harder time getting there. It's kinda like a land island, a place where a small population could hold on for a long time after everything else is quiet. Could something still be there today? I'm not gonna say no, because the sightings on the mainland have never stopped either. And now we know that the thylacine was alive in the remote Australian refuge far more recently than anyone thought. Now, many serious researchers are already focused on Tasmania and on the mainland. That work is real. We believe it could still be alive in those places, and I will leave the question in their hands. But there is a third place that almost no one ever speaks about. New Guinea, the second largest island on Earth, bigger than Texas. The eastern half of the country is Papua New Guinea, and the western half is Indonesian Papua, full of mountains, rainforests, rivers and swamps, and highlands that are brutal to move through. New Guinea is not just Asian jungle, it has a deep ancient connection to Australian world. Tree kangaroos, cuscuses, cassowaries, marsupials. Because Australia and New Guinea once used to be connected in a giant landmass called Chahul. Animals moved freely across that world. And the thylacines was one part of that world. Fossil evidence confirmed it lived there. So after mainland populations disappeared, could one isolated pocket have survived in New Guinea? Not across the whole island. One basin, one mountain valley, one region where dingoes barely reached and humans almost never went. We thought we knew the whole thylacine story, but there was a real chance we never finished reading it. If thylacines survived in New Guinea, they would have not survived everywhere. They would have needed a refuge. And here's the thing, we just saw the exact same idea work in mainland. Arnhem Land, brutal terrain, almost no human pressure, lone dingo pressure, a pocket where the thylacines survived for longer than anywhere believed. Maybe that is also why there are still sightings coming out from remote parts of mainland Australia. A small group, a single refuge, an animal that never left the place that protected it. In New Guinea, the same logic could apply, just an even more extreme version. One place that keeps coming up is the Mamberamo Basin, western New Papua, Papua New Guinea, a river system covering around 8 million hectares of rainforest, swamps and mountains. 8 million hectares is not a patch of trees, it is a world. To put it into perspective, 8 million hectares is larger than many areas where entire species of large animals live out their whole existence. You might wonder whether a small isolated group could even survive genetically, but 8 million hectares answers that. A population with that kind of territory has room, real room, to maintain diversity across generations. Reaching the Mamberamo properly requires permits from the Indonesian government, permissions from local tribal communities, boats, guides who know the land and the language, medical backup, and serious funding. Even with all of that, you could spend weeks there without finding anything. That's exactly the point. People ask, if it is alive, why has nobody found it? Because nobody has truly looked. Not in the right place, not with the right resources, not yet. We thought we knew what to search for 90 years. Maybe the wall was never water, maybe it was always jungle. Okay, interesting, gather here an area that's suitable to hold thylacines. But is there actually any evidence or proof pointing for a thylacine? Well, you gotta believe it. In parts of New Guinea, local communities describe an animal called the Dobsegna, striped, dog-like, and a stiff, unusual tail. It even has a jaw that opens far wider than any dog's jaw. We have to be honest, a name is not proof, a description passed between communities is not proof. But local people who live on land often know it far better than any scientist to arise for a week. And a name like that, in the same region where the thylacine once lived, is a reason to ask harder questions. This is where wildlife biologist Forrest Galante enters the story. Galante has spent years searching for animals the world believed are gone, and he brought forward one account that is very difficult to forget. A woman helping him look for the thylacine in Indonesia and New Guinea came across a local account about a man who kept a strange dog-like striped animal as a pet. Galante asked her to investigate, and she took a long journey deep into the jungles. Approximately 3 weeks later she returned, and she had an unbelievable story to say over. This man found 2 young animals inside a hollow log, which would have been the way thylacines kept their young. They were striped, dog-like, and he kept them. One died quickly, and the other survived for a while. He raised them basically like a dog, together with the other dogs, but one day a dog killed it. They ate it, and the only thing left over was part of the jaw. When she came, she got the jaw, and she took some photographs. She didn't think of bringing back the jaw because it was cooked and it was damaged. So therefore we have no DNA and no specimen. The evidence slipped away before anyone understood exactly what it was. Could it have been a thylacine? Well, possibly. A local wild dog? Yeah, it could also be. Could it be a story that shifted as it traveled? Absolutely. But without DNA, we can't know anything for certain. But if that story is even partially accurate, something interesting was alive in that jungle not very long ago. Now some people will ask a fair question. New Guinea has people and communities. How can a dog-sized animal be walking around and nobody knows about it? The answer is, well, some people do. The communities living inside that area have a name for it. They describe it with stripes, the walk, the jaw, and remember, this is an animal that researchers believe could stand a foot away from you and you will not even see it. It's camouflage built into its body over hundreds of thousands of years. Beyond that, the region keeps proving something remarkable. Indonesia and New Guinea have protected some of the most extraordinary wildlife rediscoveries in recent decades. Animals thought to be gone or never even known to science keep appearing there. In the Fadja Mountains of New Guinea, researchers recently came across an animal called the pygmy long-fingered possum. It was previously known only from one single 6,000-year-old fossil. One fossil. That was the entire scientific record, and then a living one turned up in the hand of a local villager, who later brought it to one of the researchers, calling it a squirrel. 6,000 years from a fossil to a living animal. Time and again, this corner of the planet tells us the same thing. We do not know it as well as we think we do. And then we have the New Guinea singing dogs. For decades it was believed that these singing dogs are extinct in the wild, and is only alive in one small area where they're breeding in captivity. But then, in 2016, researchers found highland wild dogs alive in a remote corner of Western New Guinea. In 2020, DNA testing confirmed they were extremely closely related to the captive singing dogs everyone assumed were the last of their kind. The animal had been there the entire time. While that's not proof of a thylacine, it does prove something that matters more than any single species. New Guinea can hide major animal stories while the outside world is completely convinced they are gone. Extinct in the wild does not always mean gone. Sometimes it just means we have not yet looked hard enough in the right area. And if it happened to a singing dog, it could happen to anything. Now we should be honest over here. We do not know a great deal scientifically about how flexible the thylacines' habitat were. What we do know is a little bit behavioral data from a few little specimens of thylacines. That scientific data suggests that the thylacine preferred open woodland and grasslands, not dense rainforests. So how could they survive in the deep jungle of New Guinea? Well, there are two strong answers. First, the thylacine may have not needed to adapt at all. Look at the jaguar. It lives in the deep Amazon and it also thrives in open grasslands. Look at the ocelot, from dry desert scrub to cold mountain forest to dense tropical jungle. Second, if adoption was needed, the thylacine had thousands of years to do so. Well, look at the Florida panther. It was isolated only for a few hundred years. In that time, it developed its own distinct traits. It has a thicker tail, a little smaller body and different build, has different markings and can live on less food. That all happened from the same species being in isolation. And if thylacine survived in New Guinea for a few thousand years, they might have not looked exactly like the thylacines we know from Tasmania. They could be smaller, slimmer, darker, a different stripe pattern, more forest adapted. Still a thylacine, but shaped by thousands of years in a different world. And one more thing worth considering. An animal with camouflage like a thylacine reportedly had does not need perfect open terrain to stay hidden. It needs cover. And a rainforest has more cover than almost anywhere on Earth. So here is the honest picture. Tasmania? Possible. Some animals almost certainly survived past 1936, and very possibly all the way into the 1990s. But 90 years of serious searching without hard evidence is a long silence. What about mainland Australia? Well, cave paintings now tell us that it was alive far more recently than anyone believed. Arnhem Land may have acted exactly like the kind of refuge we are describing. What about New Guinea? Well, former range confirmed by fossil records, terrain that block any real search, local communities describing a striped animal by name, and an island that keeps revealing animals that the world declared gone. Almost nobody is searching over their property, while there's no confirmed photograph and no clean DNA and no carcasses. But there's just enough that the question deserves a real answer. Not a weekend trip, a serious funded expedition in a place that animals once called home. And while that remains open, science is already working on the extinction, lab-built thylacines from preserved DNA. If colossal bioscientists could do that, the world will be remarkable. But a lab animal is not a survivor. A surviving wild population would mean an unbroken line, a living history that never ended. Not a comeback, but a revelation. That is why this matters, not because every sighting is real, not because every story is proof, but because the natural world is still larger than our maps, and some of its secrets still have stripes. Do you think the thylacine is still out there? Where would you look? Tasmania, mainland Australia, or somewhere deep in New Guinea? So maybe you actually know something, a sighting, a local story, or piece of information that never made it into any official record. Leave it in the comments right now, because this is the exact kind of topic that could be answered and solved by people watching this video. This is The Living World. I will see you in the next one.